Before we begin today's story, take a moment to subscribe to the channel if you enjoy emotionally driven stories that stay with you long after the video ends. These stories aren't loud or rushed, they quietly settle into your heart. And if you stay until the end, you may find yourself thinking about this one longer than you expect. I never thought a quiet winter morning would force me to face emotions I had buried for years. My name is Evelyn. I'm 42 years old, a wife, a mother, and someone who believed she understood her place in the world, until that belief slowly began to crack. Have you ever felt lonely, even when your life looks complete from the outside? It was January, the kind of cold that silences everything. Snow covered the streets, the trees, the rooftops, like the world was holding its breath. Inside our house, the heater hummed softly, but the cold still found its way into every corner. I sat alone at the kitchen table, my hands wrapped around a cup of coffee that had already gone cold. My husband had left early for work. He always did. We had built a life together, stable, respectful, but somewhere along the way, presence had been replaced by routine. My son Nathan was still asleep upstairs. Nathan was 21, quiet, thoughtful, and incredibly talented. He had turned a small corner of our home into his art studio, a place where unfinished paintings leaned against the walls, brushes lay scattered, and ideas lived half-formed on canvas. Art was his language. It was how he spoke when words failed him. I heard the stairs creak. "Good morning, Mom." Nathan stood there, holding a cup of tea and a painting. His hair was messy, his eyes still heavy with sleep, but there was excitement in his expression, the kind you only see when someone creates something meaningful. "Do you want to see what I worked on last night?" he asked. I nodded. When he turned the canvas toward me, I stopped breathing for a moment. The painting wasn't just skillful, it was emotional, strong yet vulnerable, quiet yet powerful. I could feel something in it, something honest. "This is beautiful," I said softly. "You have a gift, Nathan." He smiled, almost embarrassed. "You're the reason I kept going," he replied, and for a brief moment, the silence between us felt warm instead of empty. That afternoon, I found myself standing outside his studio door. I hadn't planned to go in, but curiosity and something deeper pulled me forward. The room smelled of paint and wood. Sunlight filtered through the window, resting gently on half-finished canvases. Nathan stood at the easel, completely focused. "I want my next series to be about emotions," he said without looking up. "Not what people show, but what they hide." His words struck me harder than I expected, because I had spent years hiding parts of myself. That evening, the house felt unusually quiet. My husband was out again, just another normal night. Nathan came into the living room and sat across from me. "Mom," he said carefully, "would you let me paint you one day? Not as a portrait, but as a story?" I didn't answer right away, because for the first time in years, I wasn't sure who I was beyond being needed by others. That night, I lay awake longer than I expected. The house was quiet. Too quiet. My husband wouldn't be home until late, and the ticking of the clock felt louder with every passing minute. My mind kept returning to Nathan's words, not as a portrait, but as a story. What story would I even tell? The next morning, sunlight filtered softly through the curtains. The snow outside had begun to melt, leaving behind a pale gray world that felt uncertain, like me. Nathan was already awake, standing in the kitchen, sketchbook in hand. "I didn't mean to make you uncomfortable last night," he said gently. "I just think everyone has a story worth telling, especially you." I nodded. "Maybe," I replied quietly. "I just haven't thought about mine in a long time." That afternoon, I agreed to sit for him, not as a model, not as an image, but as a memory. He set up his canvas near the window, where the light was soft and forgiving. I sat in a simple chair, hands folded in my lap. "Just relax," Nathan said. "There's no rush." And for once in my life, I listened. As he painted, silence filled the room. Not an awkward silence, but a peaceful one, the kind that allows thoughts to surface without fear. I found myself remembering things I had forgotten, the dreams I once had, the choices I made for others, the parts of myself I quietly set aside. Nathan worked carefully, never staring, only observing, the way an artist does when he's trying to understand, not judge. At one point, he paused. "You're strong," he said, "but you carry a lot inside." Those words stayed with me because they were true. Later that evening, my husband returned home, tired, distant, kind, but absent. We exchanged routine words, routine smiles, and I realized something painful but honest. We hadn't truly spoken in years. When Nathan finally showed me the finished painting, I felt my breath catch. It wasn't a portrait of my face, it was a portrait of weight and resilience. A woman sitting quietly, light touching her shoulders, shadows behind her, but not consuming her. Tears welled in my eyes. "That's me," I whispered. Nathan nodded. "That's who you've always been." That night I stood alone in front of the mirror, not searching for youth, not longing for the past, but recognizing myself again. I understood something important. Being seen doesn't mean being desired. Sometimes it simply means being understood. Nothing inappropriate happened, no lines were crossed, but something changed. I started speaking more. I started asking questions. I started choosing honesty first, with myself, then with others. Some stories aren't about scandal, they're about awakening. And sometimes the most dangerous emotional territory is simply realizing you've been invisible for too long.